We want to learn how to write an app in Android and iOS with actually no programming knowledge. And this is, I would say 5 years ago, this would have been impossible. But with the new framework Flutter, this becomes a possibility for every single person who is not really able to write own code, but with Flutter, he's able to write his own app. I will show you the advantages and what Flutter is actually some seconds later. Give me a second, somehow the presentation isn't working really well. Okay, so some words to me. I've been developing apps for around 6 years now. I started with Android, which was okay. It was kind of hard at the beginning because the framework wasn't really good at this time. And 4 years later, I included also iOS development, mobile app development in my repertoire, which was way better. It was easier to develop apps in iOS, so yeah. It was fine, yet there was something missing. The problem here is, you see, I need to write for one app two code bases. I needed to write it for Android. I need to write it for iOS. Whenever there are some changes, I need to write it in both languages, and this sucked a little bit. So 1.5 years ago, I started to join the Flutter community. Flutter started in 2018 in December, and Flutter enables you to write for both platforms an app, a mobile app, a desktop app, and a web app with actually just one code base. So it's pretty cool. But we'll talk about this in detail a little bit later. First of all, here's the structure of the presentation. First of all, I will tell you what is Flutter, why should we need it, use it, and why I love it. Second of all, I will tell you the 2 key principles of Flutter. So I think after you understood the 2 key principles of Flutter, you should be able to actually write your first Flutter app. And they are pretty simple, so yeah, keep looking for it. Okay, and the third point, we will discuss the setup and installation just to give you a little note. I won't go through the entire setup and installation of the Flutter app because this would take too much time. It would take around 1 hour, and I think our time is better spent to create the Flutter app. So I will give you all the links and all the videos which you need to install it, but I won't do it in detail now with you. Okay, so after we've installed and set up all this necessary stuff we need, I will show you how to work in Android Studio. Android Studio is an integration development environment where you can write your Flutter app. It's pretty simple, actually. I'm just going to show you because it was quite hard for me at the beginning to understand where everything is in Android Studio. All right, so and after we did this, I'm going to show you how to write an app, and first app, and we call this app now You Can Do It app. So it will be a motivational app, and give me 1 second. It will look like this. So we will have here now some motivational quotes, and whenever we press on this button, a new quote will pop up and make our day happier. So let's get started. Yeah, just to say this, if you have any question to this presentation, I would kindly ask you to write it down, ask me this in the end, because I think it will be a little bit confusing if I answer to all your questions during the presentation. So just write it down. I will try to answer them as good as I can at the end of the presentation. All right, so let's get started. Flutter, why should you love it? And I don't really know why you should love it, maybe because it's awesome, but I love it because it helps me increase my productivity. So, but the reason why I love it, let's talk about this a little bit more in detail. Before I started with Flutter, before Flutter development, before Flutter became a thing, you had to write 2 code bases, one for iOS and one for Android. You have to write it in either Java or Kotlin, or in a C# or a Swift. So yeah, this was kind of a hassle because instead you had to write 300,000 lines of code instead of 150,000 lines of code. It sucked a little bit. One of the further problems is some of my clients want to have an app which is want to have a mobile app for Android and iOS, and they want to have a web app. not the entire functionality within the app should be in the web app, but there should be some kind of functionality. So now you need 3 code bases. You need to have also a web app. You need to write it in HTML, CSS, JavaScript, and PHP. And yeah, this is kind of a lot of code, and it's kind of expensive for your client, and it takes so much time for you to write it all. So this is a problem. Another problem also is that in Android and iOS, it should be intuitive that whenever the screen size changes, the layout should change automatically. But this is not the case, actually. If you have, for example, a small cell phone or mobile phone, and you have a large cell phone, a Pixel 2, for example, you need to write in Android for every screen size, a different layout. So for example, you need to write just one Android app, not one layout for one screen. You need to write 5 layouts for one screen. And this could be really, really time consuming after some time. After you created, for example, 20 screens, you have to maintain 100 layouts. So it's pretty time consuming. And yeah, this is solved in Flutter. I will go into detail after this. Another point why what I had to do before Flutter is whenever there was a change within the app, and it couldn't be just a small change. For example, like you need to change a text and you weren't smart enough to variabilize it in a string folder. You had to go into every layout and had to change the text. And after you changed it, you had to reload the emulator and check if the change broke the layout. And if this wasn't the case, you had to go to the next layout and have to check if the text change broke your layout again. And this was super time consuming. This was one of the main reasons why it sometimes took half a year or 1 year to create a simple app. This was crazy. And yeah, it was also a problem for me. But one of the reasons why I started loving Flutter, because it solves this problem. And the last point, why programming without Flutter was pretty difficult in earlier years is because when you need to compile your code on the emulator to see what you've written and how to check your app, the problem here is whenever you change something, to reload the app on the emulator, it took around 1 to 5 minutes, no kidding. So for example, whenever you changed something, you needed to wait an enormous time to simply just see this change. And you can see if you're doing 100 changes, for example, you want to see it. It was pretty hard, pretty time consuming. So this was changed. This has been changed because of Flutter. Today, now you only need to maintain one code base in Dart for iOS, for Android, for web and desktop. So it's pretty cool, isn't it? And the problem with these layouts that you have different layouts has also been solved by Flutter because it gave us, Flutter framework gave us some tools to align the properties so it automatically adjusts whenever the screen sizes of your cell phone gets bigger or smaller. So now you only need to maintain 1 or 2 screen sizes depending on how detailed you want it to be. But it's not 20 or 10 screen sizes for one layout, 10 layouts for one screen size. So, and the compiling, so for example, if you load up your Flutter app on an emulator and you change something, you don't have to wait a minute or 5 minutes to see the change. You simply just click on the hot reload button and it changes automatically and shows you the change, which is really awesome because you can, within no time, create an app. It's awesome. I'm sorry, sometimes a little bit difficult in English. Okay, so changes within the app, let them come. Before Flutter, I was like, oh, do we really need to change it? Now it's like, let's do it. And here's a favorite quote of mine. Everything should be made as simple as possible, but not simpler, from Albert Einstein. And it's totally true in app development too, because before Flutter, you really had to write so much code just to do so little. And now it became so much simpler, everything. This was one of the main reasons why I love Flutter. And I hope you do too soon. All right, principles of a Flutter app. So there are two key principles. First of all, everything in Flutter is a widget. What is a widget? A widget could be described as a Lego block, for example. Every Lego block has its own task and its own characteristics. For example, as you can see here in the image, there is a Lego block who has the characteristic red, and there's a Lego block who has the characteristic blue. This is the same in Flutter. In Flutter, there could be, for example, a container which has the characteristic red and which will be shown in the screen as the red. And it can be also shown in the screen as blue. So because everything in Flutter is a widget, and every widget has its own characteristics, you can simply just, customize your app the way you want it to look like. So second of all, I'll show you here a little example. So this is the first characteristic. For example, here, as you can see in the scaffold widget, which is below the material app and theme data. Within the scaffold widget, it gives you the scaffold widget. It's a widget. You can also view it as a Lego block, and it has its own task. Its task is to align different widgets within the screens. For example, it should be aligned the app bar on the top of the screen. It has the characteristic app bar, as you can see here, and it has the characteristic body. The body shows the space below the app bar. So for example, if you want to access the space below the app bar and want to put in widgets, whatever you want to, you simply just access the body characteristic. So this is the first key principle. The second key principle is, as you can see here, everything is how do I explain it best in English? The second principle is that every block, you can put every block together. For example, you have a scaffold, it's the first Lego block. And within the scaffold, you can use, for example, the app bar characteristic to put an app bar within the scaffold. So you put another Lego block on the scaffold. And within the app bar, you can also put another Lego block again within it, text widget. And you can do it to build, and this is the way how you build apps. You put Lego blocks or widgets on top of another. And this is how we are going to build the app. And now this may sound a little bit confusing maybe for you. I hope I can make it a little bit more clearer, or a little bit clearer to you once we start developing the app. And yeah, just bear with me. So just to recap, there are two principles. The first principle is everything in Flutter is a widget. Every widget has its own task. Every widget has its own characteristics. It can be, for example, a color, or it can be, for example, a title, like in the app bar. The second principle is our Flutter app is built by putting the widgets together and stacking them on top of each other. For example, like here, the scaffold is an app bar, a text is in the app bar, and the app bar is within the scaffold. They are all put on top of each other. All right, so I hope this is not too confusing for you. If it is, write it down. I will try to explain it to you a little bit more in detail later. But let's keep moving on. Is it complicated? The question always comes to me from people who are not really capable, who haven't programmed a mobile app yet. With Flutter, it's totally not complicated. As long as you remember the key principles, this should be really pretty simple for you to write a Flutter app. All right, so let's start with the more trier part, with the setup. What you need for developing a Flutter app or an app, you need to have a computer, a laptop. And just notice this, if you have a laptop which is around 10 years old, maybe Android Studio and the emulator won't run on it really smoothly. So yeah, you need a little bit more powerful computer and laptop. We will use the IDE, Integration Development Environment, Android Studio, where we develop the Flutter app in it. We will need an Android emulator, which we can download from the internet. We need a Mac if you want to test our Flutter app on an iOS device. If you don't have a Mac, this is no problem. The problem here is just if you want to test your app on an iOS device, you need to have a Mac. Otherwise, you simply just can test your app on an Android device. And if you have a Mac, you also need to install Xcode. Yeah, here are both setups. So for Windows, here the first link is the documentation, which is really detailed. Like I really love the current documentation. The first time when I downloaded the app with the documentation from the Flutter team, man, this was a hassle. It took me around 2 days to complete it because the documentation wasn't good at all. And everywhere popped up error messages, and I had no chance to fix them because there haven't been any answers yet. So yeah, now you've got a pretty easy job to do. You simply just have to follow this awesome documentation, and then you can start developing the app. If you're more the kind of person who installs or learns things through videos, I also included here a video for Android Studio in this installation and for the Flutter installation, which are pretty good, so I recommend them. All right, for the Mac setup, same thing here. There's the documentation, an Android Studio video, and a Flutter installation video. Just follow these guides, and yeah, you are set and ready to go. All right. So just for the installation and setup, I know. No one is perfect. We programmers aren't perfect too. And trust me, we programmers most of the time not really coding anything. We are debugging most of the time. And this is the problem here too. Most of the time you will get some mistakes will happen. You will get error messages, and it can be super frustrating. But everyone has to go through this. And if you get some error messages, I know most of the time it happens on the way to install it when you set up your computer and install everything. Just be sure everyone, this happens to everyone. Don't let the errors intimidate you. And if you have an error message, simply just copy the code, paste it in a Google browser, and search for a solution. Because 99% of the time, someone else already had this problem, this exact problem, and it has been solved in, for example, Stack Overflow. So yeah, don't be afraid if something like this happens. It happened to me too, and I'm pretty sure you will get a answer in the internet. And if you don't get an answer, don't be shy. Just ask. You can ask it in Stack Overflow. You can ask me. This is no problem for me. It happened to me too. So yeah, you can ask me whatever you want when you don't know. When you don't know further. All right. So after we've done with the setup, let's start with the You Can Do It app. And here's the setup. First of all, I want to explain you a little bit how to navigate in Flutter, in Android Studio, not in Flutter, in Android Studio. The first time when I changed from the IDE Eclipse to Android Studio, it was a little bit confusing for me what everything meant. It's actually pretty intuitive. So here we've got the project, and this is our Flutter project. This is the code with which we run the Flutter. And here are some files, the Android file where you can put, for example, your app icon. Here's the iOS file where you can put your app icon. And this is the file where all our changes for the Flutter app will be most of the time. It'll include all the screens, all the business logic, all the objects. Everything which we need for our Flutter app will be within this lib folder. And we already have now 2 files. This one, in a second. This one will be, in the end, our entire Flutter app. I just wrote down so we can look at our Flutter app here. But we will start from scratch on with this blank screen. Okay, so this is the project structure. This here, super important, is I think one of your best friends when you start debugging your app. Because whenever there's an error message, for example, no, this is not an error message. For example, here, now there's an error, and it will show, hey, there's an error, come on. And if you try to compile it here now, there will be an error message not working. You can't run your app because there's a mistake, and you need to fix it. And yeah, I will show you later how the error message will look like. But yeah, just keep it in mind that when, for example, you see this red underlining and you try to compile your app, it won't work. Pretty surely it won't work. So we know we need this here for debugging. And here is where we can start our emulator. Here you can start your iOS simulator or your Android emulators. If you start Android Studio the first time, you won't have any Android emulators here. To create your first Android emulator, you simply just have to click here on the RVD manager. And here you need to click Create Virtual Device. Now you can choose Android emulator. I normally choose Pixel 2, which is which has a kind of large screen, and a Nexus 6, which is kind of fast. And yeah, then I simply just click Next, choose my system, my API level. Most of the time you haven't downloaded yet API level, so you need to download it first. And then you simply just click Next. And then if you're done, you simply just click Finish. And then your Android emulator will be created and will be shown here. Then you can simply just click here on the play button and voila, your Android emulator is running. All right, my emulator is already running as far as I know. Give me a second. Here it is. Hope so. Yeah, here it is. All right. So I have chosen for the app development now the iOS developer, the iOS emulator, and yeah. Okay. So super important. Nothing about emulators anymore in this case. How do we start the app on the emulator? We start the app by clicking on this play button. And with this play button, it will load first time the app on our emulator, and it will start the app. After we've committed some changes, for example, we committed a new app bar here, then we don't have to click this button to reload load the entire app again on the emulator. We simply just click the hard reload button, and it will show our changes within milliseconds. And if we need to close the app, for example, I don't know why, but for example, we've written a for loop with an infinite ending, it would crash our app, but it wouldn't close the app. So then we can close the app with this button here. All right, so I think now I've shown you the entire setup. Yeah. If there are any more questions left, and if you start developing your app, your first app, and you have some questions and you can't find the solution within the internet, just give me a quick just heads up, write me an email, and I will try to help you as good as I can. All right. So let's start coding. Let's get to the fun part here. Let's start creating our first app. You can do it app. Okay. So just to look at the design first of all, we have here now our app. Give me a second. We have here now our app, and we have an app bar in it. We have text within the app bar, box, and some boxes and some text. So it sounds pretty easy. Let's see if it's easy. Let's see. Give me a second. Somehow not working. All right. Okay. So, sorry, the inconvenience somehow it doesn't resize automatically. Okay. So we have now a blank screen here. No, we don't have one. Okay, let me get it right, and then we can move on from there. This here is the main function. Within the main function, the first screen will be called. So for example, if you have one screen, you simply just put the name of the screen in here. So for example, if this widget is the stateful widget, and I put it in here, then this screen will be called. But for example, if I have another widget, another screen, and I only want to show this screen here, I simply just put the name of this one in the main function. Just so you know, but this is not okay. This is not, yeah, this is okay. All right. So how do we start? First of all, we need to start our app on an emulator. And we can do this by, I've already shown you this, clicking on the play button. Let's start. And then we can see here in the run folder, it's exactly what I told you. The program now just starts to load the entire app on the emulator, and it tells us where it is right now. So currently it is launching on the iPhone in debug mode. It is running the Xcode build here. And after it's finished, it will give us a note to this too. And if there's any bug, any error, This also shows the error message within here. So keep this in mind, this is super important. Okay, so the Xcode build is done. And we see our, oh, that's a little bit too much. We see our first app, blank app. All right. So there are two principles. I've already told you this. First principle is in Flutter, everything is a widget. And a widget has its own task to do, and it has its own characteristics to do. And the second principle is all the widgets build on top of each other. So it's like a tree. All the widgets have its own task, and they build on top of each other. So for example, the scaffold. We have a scaffold, and now the scaffold gives us the possibility to align different views the way how normal apps align the views. For example, it has an app bar, it has a body, it has a floating action button, it has a navigation bar, it has quite a lot of features. If you go into the source code, Command B, you need to click Command B on a Mac, and you can see all the different characteristics which a scaffold has. And what we now need is the app bar and the body, because we need, as we can see here in our presentation, we need an app bar with text in it, and we need a body. The body is all the space below the app bar. You need to access this too. So let's include an app bar. The characteristic here is called app bar, and we need a widget for it. And the cool thing is the widget is also called app bar. So let's hot reload it and let's see if it's working. Perfect. Now this, as you can see, within milliseconds, the emulator changed and showed us the change we made. And we also need a text in it. And therefore, you need to check if you have never worked with an app bar property or widget, you have to check its properties or its characteristics. And here's so many characteristics. What we need currently, leading, for example, is the button on the left side. But what we actually need is the title. We want to write some text in it. So we need to access the title characteristic. And simply just want to put in some text. So we say text. And within the text, we write, you can do it. Let's call it, you can do it. So as you can see here, the principles stay the same. First of all, everything is a widget and it has its own task. The app bar has its own task to fulfill, to show the app bar. And it has the characteristic, it has many characteristics. One of the characteristics is title. And when we, now with the second principle, put on the title another widget, in this case the text widget, it will show up as a text widget here and show our text within the app bar. All right, so just a quick heads up here, or a quick advice here. If you don't have a Mac and you want to test your app on an iOS device, for example, you can simply just click here on the Flutter inspector and click here on platform. And here you can change the platform, the design from the platform, from iOS to Android. And yes, this is not perfect at all. It's not working currently. This is not perfect at all. Here, and as you can see, this platform Android would show the app on the left side, and the platform and iOS would show the app in the center. Yeah, but I want actually the title always be in the center. It doesn't matter if it's on the platform iOS or Android. So I simply just put here a center title. It has a characteristic center title, and it has two values. A Boolean value. A Boolean value can be false or true. So the center title, I want it to be true. It should be always center. So now it doesn't matter which platform I'm on, it will always be centered. Okay, just to let you know, this is a pretty cool feature if you don't have a Mac. All right. So now you may be wondering, why is the color blue and not purple as I promised you in the mockups? And yes, I normally choose blue. Purple is one of my favorite colors, but Leah loves the color blue, and I want to make Leah happy, so we will choose the color blue for this example. All right. What we need now, I've already opened this here. We need to be really specific here. In app development, we need to be precise and see what kind of characteristics every widget needs to have. Okay, and here now we can see that there's a box, or this should be a box, and within this box, the text should be aligned in the center, and there should be text in it. The box should have, as you can see here, some border radius, and it should have the color blue. How are we going to do this? Give me a second, and I will show you this. All right. So we need to access the body property characteristics because the body shows the space below the upper. We need the space below. We need to access the space below the upper. So we write body, and now we need to put multiple widgets below the body. But how are we going to do this? Normally, as you can see here, we simply just always put one widget on top of each other. Now we need to stack need to align multiple widgets. And this is pretty handy in Flutter because you have multiple layouts which you can choose from, and you can align with this layout the widgets differently. For example, if you choose a column layout and you put two different widgets in it, just for example, it has a height of 100 and it has a width of 100, and for the purpose of demonstration, it has a color of yellow. And now we also choose another widget, copy this in here, 50 and 50, and the color is blue. Now these children will be aligned vertically, as you can see here. All the widgets will be aligned vertically within the column. And there are, as I said, multiple layouts, and it's really important to get to know each of these layouts because every layout has its own advantages. So the column stacks the children vertically. A row, for example, let's write it right, aligns its children horizontally. So if you need to stack or align children horizontally to one another, you simply just use the row widget. And now the tricky part is, what if you want to get tricky and you want to stack widgets on top of each other? For this, there's also a layout, which is called stack. And now you can stack the widgets on top of each other, the way you want it to look like. Okay, there are multiple layouts, like there are really a lot of layouts. I recommend you to simply just type in the Google search layout Flutter, and there will be all layouts listed, and there's super cool, super good explained. So I really recommend you doing this if you want to create an own Flutter app. And yeah, what we need now for our own Flutter app, we need a column because we need the widgets to be aligned vertically. So we're going to do this. Let's change it to a column. All right. So now we have a column and they're aligned vertically, but we are far from ready. We need to make some more adjustments. So as you can see here, we want the view to expand as much space as it can, because in our example, both views expand as far as they can because they want to consume all the place. We don't want to have too much white. This looks weird. So there's a exact widget for this, which is called expanded. And you can use the expanded widget within the column or within a row. And what it does is to expand and use the entire space as much space as it's possible can. So when I click now hot reload or Command S, my computer, it will expand the widget as fast as it can within the high. And when we simply just delete the properties hide it with for this container, it will also expand in the horizontal direction. So it's pretty handy to align the widget the way you want it to be aligned, to simply just align the widgets and expand it. All right, so but we are not yet ready yet. We need to be a little bit more specific. We need a margin here, to have a little margin here. We need a border radius. We need another color. So let's do this. We can change the color here in the color characteristic or property, which is called blue. Now we have a blue widget. And we also need some margin, because without a margin, trust me, every layout can look super ugly But when you put some padding and margin in it, it can look like the best layout ever. So never forget the margins. Okay, we simply just access the margin property by edge and sets, and then we simply just call all and put in 20. And now we have a margin on all, which has the same size on every side. So here it has the same size here, here, here. All right, now we need a border radius, and maybe the container also has the border radius property characteristic. But as you can see here, it is shown that there isn't a border radius defined. This is weird because the container, one of its main task is to decorate the widgets below it, to show some decoration. And this is the cool thing here. We can use simply just or access the decoration property. And by accessing the decoration property, we also get access to the border radius. So here we simply just have to write border radius. And we want it to be circular. There's several possibilities. We can write all, and we need to write a radius for it. Radius, for example, doesn't have to be circular. It can also be elliptical. Elliptical means that it can have different size ratios, side ratios. Tongue breaker. Okay, so, but we simply just access the circular one and say we want to have a 12 pixel, a border radius with 12 pixels. Now we hot reload, and voila, we got our first beautiful error message. So what happened here? The problem here is, as you can see here in the message, we haven't done our homework because the container can contain a color because this is one of the properties we can access here. But the problem here is the box decoration can also contain a color. And the Flutter team said, well, you could for sure paint two colors. This wouldn't be a problem. But the problem is here that the performance would be pretty bad because first you have to write the color blue, and then you would have to write the color transparent in this case. But we don't want this. We only want to write one time the color. Otherwise, the performance would be bad. So when we change this color property and simply just put it in here, now there shouldn't be any problem anymore. The color property is now right widget. And this is really important. As you can see here, let's get one more step back. If you have any problem here, and trust me, you will get error messages. I'm not perfect, and for sure you are not perfect too. Maybe you're perfect, I don't know. But if you are not, you will get error messages. And the problem here is, if you don't know how to handle this, 1 second. Marcel, hallo. Ich muss gerade noch die Präsentation machen. Okay, das mal schnell mitmachen. Okay. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So one of the, okay, here's my daughter. Hallo. My little daughter, Mausi. Könnt ihr schnell rausgehen? Ich mache die Präsentation noch und dann komme ich raus, okay? Okay. Komm, ich komme gleich wieder. Okay.
The beauty of home office and lockdown, that guests are coming sometimes.
All right, sorry for the interruption.
No worries at all.
To say hello. All right, if you have an error message, it is really important that you read the message, the assertion here. And the assertion tells you there's a problem on line 315, position 15, and there shouldn't be a color. There should be a color here in the container when you have a box decoration. And if you want to be even more specific, you simply just search here for where is the first error which the message throws. Simply just click here, and you see here's the problem, and it should be that the problem should be somewhere in this file. For example, if you have, I have pretty often like 100 files in one project, then it's pretty awesome to know where the problem, in which file the problem is. So in this case, it would be in my homepage too. And then you simply just have to look for where did it go wrong here. All right, so after we change this one, let's keep moving. Okay, so what do we need now? I think we've got most of the stuff done. We simply just need one more padding. Just to explain you the difference between margin and padding. Margin is the margin outside of the box, and padding is the margin within the box. So when you have a child within the box, and you give it a padding, it will get a padding within the box. And when you give it a margin, the margin will be outside the box. Here's the margin, and the padding will be, let me show it to you. One here will be here. Child is, we have a child, we have a text, because we need a text within the box, and let's call it my viewers are super awesome. We'll change this later. Okay. As you can see here now, there's a padding. If I exclude the padding, there won't be any padding within the box anymore. But we want to have a padding in it. So we need, but we are not finished yet. There are some things to do yet. As you can see, the text isn't styled. We need a little bit more color. We need to create a font size. We need to align the text correctly. So how are we going to do this? There's a property or characteristic in the text widget, which is called style. And with this characteristics, we can simply just style the text pretty easy. We can access the font size and set it to 40, for example. We can access the, we can access the color and set the color to white. And when we hot reload now, as you can see, now the text doesn't look too bad at all. Yet there's a little problem. We want this text to be aligned in the center. This text should be centered. And there's a property, a characteristic for it, which is called text align. Pretty intuitive, actually. And when we access the text align.center, we simply just center the text. But we are not done yet. We want this text to be aligned within the box too. How are we going to do this? Container is our greatest friend in this because, yeah, the container is there to contain views and to decorate these views with different properties. And it also has other characteristics or a property with alignment. It allows us to align the property within the container. So we say align center. It should be aligned in the center. And voila, we've got it. We now have our first container ready and set. So there's not a lot left anymore. We only need this container, and then we need the logic for it. As you can see here, this container has the same border radius as this container. It has a color property, it has a text in it, which is centered. So because you want to get your task done as fast as possible, and I want to get my task done as fast as possible, we are all lazy, we simply just copy this code and paste it in here. And now we have a second box, which is not too far away from the design we actually want to. We simply just need to change some parts. For example, the text should be next, not my viewers are super awesome, which is of course true. Okay, let's hot reload it and next. We need to change the color. The color should have a little higher opacity. And this is a cool feature here. You can access the colors here. There are like hundreds of colors which you can access through the Flutter framework. And you can give it an opacity. Right opacity. And the opacity should be around, let's say, 0.2. And yeah, looks good to me. But as you can see, the color of the text should be blue. So let's change the color to blue. We simply just need to access here the style property of the text and change the color. And it is blue. Awesome. So now one key problem here, which we are currently facing is this one. This box should be quite larger than this box. And how are we going to do this? This is the cool thing with the expanded widget. Expanded widget gives you the possibility to give the widgets below it a weight factor. And this weight factor allows you to say, for example, the first widget should be, for example, 80% of the screen, and the second widget should be 20% of the screen. And we can do the same here. For example, here, the first widget should be 80% of the screen, and the second widget should be 20% of the screen. So yeah, 1 divided by 5 is 20, and 4 divided by 5, 4 plus 1 is 5. is 80. So yeah, it gives you a weight factor. And now when we click on hot reload, it writes how can I go? I'm sorry. So it simply just gives the it simply just writes the property the way it should be, which the way we gave it the flex factor. Okay. Okay, sorry if it's a little bit confusing. It's a little bit hard for me to explain in English, to be quite honest with you. First time I'm doing this, for example, explaining someone how to code in English, so you can't. All right. There's one more thing missing here. As you can see here, there's the margin, and there are double margins now. Let's see it. We can here see all the alignments and the margin paddings, which we wrote down. And as you can see here, there's a margin. There are two margins. There's one margin of this box, and there's one margin of this box. We only want one margin for this box, because otherwise it doesn't look symmetric and it looks ugly. So we simply just write here edge insets from left, top, right button. And we simply just give every side the margin which it needs. So top should be 0, right should be 20, button should be also 20. And now it doesn't look too ugly anymore. All right, so congratulations. You've completed your first task. We did now the entire design for the screen. And now we need to implement a little bit more logic. Logic is, I think, a little bit difficult part. But it's not too difficult at all. If you want to go a little bit more deeper, how to write logic, how to implement logic, I really recommend you to learn Dart. And Dart is the language of Flutter, the CSR, everything is written in Dart. And yeah, it's not too complicated at all. If you need more guidance for this, I can give you some sources. And yeah, okay. So there's one thing missing. When I click on this next, I can click as often as I want. I can't see anything. And I want to be able to show the user that he clicked on the next button. And we can do this with the Inkwell widget. And with the Inkwell widget, catches all the touch events on the screen and shows us and is able to show us then some animation. For example, when the user taps on tab on the screen, there should be nothing. Nothing should be triggered, but I want to see that the user clicks on the screen. So whenever, we need to hot reload the app. So whenever I click now on the screen, as you can see, I see now, the user has clicked on the box. So that's pretty cool. But we also need to want to have some logic. Whenever we click on the screen, on the next button, we want a new quote, a new motivational quote for us. For this, I've created a list of strings with super cool motivational quotes, which you can read later on. And we need to access this list. First of all, we simply just, the list is called You Can Do It list. We simply just access the list by writing in the text, You Can Do It list. Preferably you write it wrong, right. And the access is through these brackets. And now you simply just say, okay, I want to access the first item of the list, so 0. If you want to access the second item of the list, 1. And this can go on until to the end of the list. For example, now I want to access the first item of the list. I put in 0. Now I can see the first item. I want to see the third item of the list. Put in, the fourth. Always starts at 0, the list. You can see here now the fourth item of the list. Important, if the list isn't too long here, for example, and you now want to access the 14 items of the list, but there aren't 14 items of the list, then Flutter framework won't like this and will say there's an error, range error, and the range is only 0 to 8, and doesn't include 14. So just be aware that you can also get out of the list, and if this happens to you, yeah, you will get an error message. Okay, but it's not our task. We want to have a random number between 0 and 8 be generated whenever we click on the next button. How can we do this? It's it's simple actually. We have a random class, and within this random class, we simply just need to write next int from 0 to the length of the list. So we simply just say, this is our list, and we want to have the length of it. Should be 8, actually. Okay. And now, when we click on it, now it shows a random string here. Whenever we hot reload the app, it shows another app, another quote. Okay, so this is a key concept which is really, really, really important to understand now. There are two different kinds of widgets in Flutter, which are super important. The first one is stateless, and the second one is stateful. We currently are in a stateful widget. What does this mean? A stateful widget allows us to rebuild the screen, the layout, the entire screen. Whenever we say, when we call set state, for example, when we call here in the function now, not null, but we call now set state, the stateful widget allows us to rebuild the entire screen again. So, for example, when I click here, when I click on the next button, it automatically rebuilds the entire screen. Whenever I click on it. All right, but there's also another widget, which is called stateless widget. Let me show it to you. Stateless. And with the stateless widget, states are cool. And with the stateless widget, you are able to only show the widget. You won't be able to rebuild anything in there. You won't be able to call set state in it. This is the advantage of the stateless widget is that it is pretty performant. When you build your entire app as a stateful widget, it will, whenever there's a change, rebuild the entire app, which could really influence after a while your performance of the app. So you don't want this. You want as many stateless widgets as possible, so the performance of your app won't be influenced by too many stateful widgets and too many rebuilds. But you need a stateful widget when you want to rebuild your screen here. So in this case, just one more advice from me. You don't have to write the entire code, the entire boilerplate here, state class, class. You don't have to write this. There's a shortcut for this. You simply just have stful, and if you write stateful as a shortcut and press enter, you will get the entire code here, and now it will be built for you automatically. And the same thing goes with stateless. So when we click here, stateless, click enter, it will be automatically created for you. So it's pretty cool and handy for you. So you don't have to write so much. All right. So actually, there's just one more thing missing, and this is the animation. I want a little animation. And I know this is a little bit more complex now, but I want to get it into detail there a little bit too, because from my experience from the Android and iOS background, it is really difficult sometimes to get animations really rolling, to get them right. And you have to write so much boilerplate. You don't have to do this in Flutter at all. You simply just have to wrap the widget you want to be animated, which is in this case the text, in a, for example, animated switcher. And whenever the screen is rebuilt by calling set state, this animated switcher will be rebuilt again. Therefore, it's a transition builder, which gives us two properties, the child and the animation. This means that the animated switcher creates for us an animation controller and controls for us the animation. We don't have to do this at all. The animated switcher is doing this all for us. We simply just have to write the animation we want, which is in this case the rotation animation, rotation transition. And here there's the turns. How many turns should it be? And the animation from the animated switcher will do the animation for us. I know, don't be angry. This is a little bit complex, I know, but I just want to show you how easy it can be to include animations in the Flutter app. So if you don't get this, what I'm currently writing, it's totally fine. Just remember that including animations in your Flutter app is super simple and shouldn't be a problem at all. Okay, now we simply just have to put in here our child. Child is here, all the text, all the widgets below the animated switcher, which is here the text. We have to give the text a key. So this is, so the framework knows that it switches its key. And now we simply just need a duration, and then we are set to go. The duration is the duration of the animation. So the duration should be around, let's say, 300 milliseconds. All right, so after we did it, now we have a beautiful, beautiful app here with all our cool quotes. Okay, I really hope I wasn't too quick. I really hope I was able to show you how to build a Flutter app. I'm sorry if you couldn't understand every word I said because I'm not a native speaker, but yeah, I hope you were able to learn a little bit how to write a Flutter app. If you have any questions about it, if you are unsure about something, just give me a heads up. You can write me an email. My email address is, it will be under the in this description, I think. Yeah, my email is eichmüller.christian@gmail.com, but I will write it down if you want to know it later. All right, so voila, we did it, and we created our first app, and I really hope you enjoyed it. And I'm looking forward to your questions now.
So yeah, there came interesting discussions in the chat. I was trying to take a look at it. Thank you everybody for engaging so much. So the last question which came in, yes, we will have the video on YouTube, and I tried to cluster the questions a little bit in the meantime. So from the beginning, there was a discussion about maybe I hope I can tell it, ask it to you now, Chris. Chris,
sure. Yeah.
There was a discussion about Swift UI, where the viewers were asking.
Yeah, no Swift UI. Yet it doesn't solve all the problems at all. Actually, you still have to write code for Swift. You still have to write code for Android. Still have to write your code for desktop apps or for web apps. So my main point here is that you have to write 4 code bases for one task. And yeah, you can use Swift UI, but this doesn't solve the problem with the 4 code bases at all.
Okay, thank you so much. I'm trying to rephrase and ask the questions. Okay, Manuel says, but you're right, it's only for Apple for now. So many questions we have. Thank you so much. So
if you have any questions, just write it down. You can write it down again, and we will try to answer it as soon as I can. Okay, React Native versus Flutter. Yeah, sure. React Native is cool. I've tried React Native too. The key problem here is I wouldn't recommend it for beginners because it's quite complicated, or it was for me quite complicated. And it's not as intuitive. For me, subjectively speaking, it isn't as intuitive as Flutter. But yeah, well, maybe you're a React Native programmer and you think React Native is like super easy, but it wasn't for me too easy. So yeah, but React Native isn't too bad. It has most of the key features as Flutter. I think one of the main problems here is that the performance isn't as great, but well, this is also just subjective for me. So yeah. React Native is cool too, but I choose Flutter because it seems more simpler for me. Okay, so I have a GitHub project. Wait, give me a second. I can post it here in the chat, and you simply just can access the code. It's a public code. You can access the code which I've written down in the GitHub project. So yeah, you can recreate the project I did. Give me a second. Here, it should be in here. Okay, you can access this GitHub project and simply just, I think I'm currently sharing. So you simply just have to click clone or download, clone this code. and then click, give me a second, close this one. After you've cloned and downloaded it, you click here, check out from the project from version control, click on Git. Then there should a window pop up, and then you simply just paste in your code. Click on clone, and then the code will be cloned. Then the framework will ask you, do you want to open it? You click no, and then you simply just search for the code here in OpenN, here in your Android Studio projects, and it should be here. It should be called We Can Do It, and then you can open it. Pretty easy. All right. Yeah, I have many examples of Flutter apps, but I would have to look them up currently. But there are really some awesome. For example, there was just some month ago a competition for who's creating the most beautiful design for clocks. So this was like incredible. Some of the designs, which I now really realized, are so beautiful. But I would have to look them up. Give me a second, maybe I can find them. How's it called? Challenge our Flutter. Challenge our Flutter clock. Flutter, maybe it's here. Yeah, we can look at this, for example. This is a beautiful UI. This is all built in Flutter. So yeah, as you can see, it's really beautiful. So with Flutter, you're actually able to create beautiful UI with no problems actually. So yeah. There was one question: are you on Twitter? Yes and no. I have an account on Twitter, but I'm not really using it at all, to be quite honest. I actually, yeah. Maybe I should start using it, but currently I'm not really on Twitter. How can we debug the application as we don't have classical code lines? You need to be more specific than this. I'm not 100% sure what you mean with this currently. What language do we write the program language? Okay, so Flutter is written in Dart. It's pretty similar to Java, with the key difference that it's not as complicated as Java, and it's super easy to write in it. The syntax is super easy to learn. It's a mix between Kotlin and Java. Kotlin has awesome features, and Java is it's just an old language, and Dart takes all the awesome features from Kotlin, for example, from Java, and includes it in itself, but also gives it more features. For example, you don't have to do any getter and setter in Java in Dart, which you have to do in Java. So yeah, it's written in Dart. Are you a Slack? Swift.slack.com. Yeah, I know what you mean. Yeah, I have Slack. I have Slack. I'm not too sure. I'm using it for my projects with my clients. But yeah, I have Slack. It should be. Give me a second. I'm not 100% sure how it's called. What about privacy with Flutter? Give me 1 second. I will check this out with Slack, and then I will answer the other questions. Okay, I think my Slack account should be on. See it. Yeah. My Slack account name is. Yeah, I will answer the privacy with Flutter. Okay, good. Okay. So privacy with Flutter. What do you mean with privacy? We don't touch any privacy with Flutter. So, yeah. What exactly do you want to know about the privacy in Flutter? There seems someone from Freelancers to. How can I add JSON web servers from Spring Boot into a Flutter project? Well, that's a pretty specific question. I think you have to do this. Well, I don't think this is the right time to answer this question because it's I think I can talk about this in 1 hour. If you want to know more about this, there's a good video on YouTube where they are including JSON. There's an extra package for JSON and decompiling JSONs, and yeah, can simply access it via Spring Boot. So yeah, if you want to be more specific about the project, talk with me a little bit more about this. We can do this later. So question: I have a MacBook Air only. No, it will be working. Yeah, I have a MacBook Air 2015 too. Funny enough, and I was working just I think 3 months ago at a client with this MacBook, and it was working fine. So it shouldn't be any problem. It will be a little bit slow, but it won't be any problem. Can you answer my question about integration with system API like co-location? Okay. Yeah, well, you can access most of the system APIs, for example, like photo framework or contacts via plugins. So they are or packages. For example, if you give in Google or write down in Google, let me do it. For example, if you do image package Flutter, you will get to the Dart library, and here you can access most of the images. Well, let's image gallery. It should be a little bit image picker. And here you can access the phone camera. You can get a picture from it, and you can choose a picture from the gallery. So most of this stuff, which are system APIs, you can access via packages. And pretty easy. I don't know. Follow what is that exactly? Can you answer my question about it? Okay, I hope this answers your question. Yeah, just go to the pubdev website, and there will be all packages you need to access the system API. Okay. Don't know, but Google can give up Flutter. Flutter skill will be in demand. Well, in my opinion, because Google is currently expanding in the Flutter within the Flutter teams, and yeah, totally agree with you. We can't know the future, but I'm pretty sure actually that the next framework, framework for mobile phones will be Fuchsia, and Fuchsia, the language in Fuchsia, or the framework in Fuchsia will be Flutter. So it is pretty unlikely that Google will say, no, we don't need Flutter anymore. We get a new framework. This would be a little bit weird because they already spent billions of dollars. So yeah, you have a valid point that it isn't sure, but I'm 100% sure, I'm 99% sure that Flutter will be the next big thing in app development. But yeah, it is from Google, so this could be a critique. Sorry, can you show it? Sorry, I didn't follow what is that exactly. Okay, Dart is a syntax. It's a language, the same way like English is a language. It's just a computer language where you can write down, where you can solve different logic problems, or yeah, it's a computer language, Dart. If you want to know more about Dart, you simply just have to type this in Google, and there will be an entire documentation, which is actually pretty cool. Recommend this to learn Dart, and it's pretty easy. So yeah, really recommend you learning it. Okay, so Dart is like Swift or Java or Kotlin. Well, yeah, Dart has all the awesome features. So let's say it this way: Dart is actually quite an old language, but because Dart 2.0, which was like I think 4 years ago, it became a super cool language because it has all the cool features the modern programming languages have, and it doesn't have the features which are pretty silly in Java or in C++, in C#. For example, to define every method with a public void, you don't have to do this at all in Dart. So it's a modern language. If you know a little bit more about languages, it should be, you should be a little bit familiar with it. So is everything public? No, not really. There's if you write public void, for example, the method is public. But if you, in Java, if you write private void, it is private. But in Dart, you simply just have to don't have to write anything, then it's public. Or you simply just make an underscore, this one, and then random and a method, and then the method is private. So it's pretty simple, actually. As I said, if you want to learn more about the Dart language, I really recommend this site here, because it summarizes everything pretty quickly. File name that was run is main Dart. Yeah. So great. Yeah, she's pretty cute, to be fair honest. Sometimes when I'm working here, she comes into my room and like, oh, daddy, what I play? And I show her what I'm doing, and then she doesn't understand it, but it's always pretty cool with her here. So yeah, it's cool when we work at home. Currently with Corona, I think most of you are affected by it. We all need to work at home, so it's kind of cool to work with your daughters right next to you. Yeah. Well, sometimes home office can be pretty hard, to be fair. When you want to concentrate on one thing, and like every 30 minutes there's someone asking you what you're doing, it can be a little bit hard sometimes. Yeah, but that's cool. It's pretty cool.